A compelling detective story, a cloak and dagger action, and a romantic drama, all these stories were taken from real life. The history of Kazakhstan is inseparable from the world history. Reflections on history, our version.
Conquering the world with science. It's difficult to determine precisely when Jungir was born. His mother, the Khan's wife, Atan, thought he was 14 in July 1815, taking into account the fact that Sultan Bukay was transferred from behind the Ural in autumn 1801. It should be considered that Jungir was born in Astrakhan province. The Khan's court had secrets, and there was a certain plainness about the king. The head of the imperial house of Bonaparte, Prince Charles, asked to call him just Monsieur Napoleon, and simply mentioned a new book about his famous predecessor.
About the way he was handling every day, including in the morning when he stand up, you know, he was very preoccupied by the cleanness of his body, for instance, you know. So it took a lot of time cleaning his teeth.
However, only a few pages of this book contain information about how Napoleon and Paul I of Russia agreed to start a campaign against India. Nothing will be said about the fact that in accordance with those plans, the Bukhay Accord, a new state, was established. Paul I and Bonaparte, the first consul, entered into a strategic alliance. They planned to merge their foreign policies and create a joint army. They considered the Bukhay Horde a starting point for conquering India. Fate changes in a peculiar way. In 1812, Napoleon invaded Russia. Sultan Bukay officially became the ruler of the inner horde, and a boy, who was heir to the Khan's throne, moved to the Astrakhan governor's house. He lived at the Astrakhan governor Stepan Andreevsky's house. Jungir was actively engaged in studying everything he could. At an early age, Jungir Khan received quite a good education, which helped him become the Khan of the Bukhay Horde in the future. Chapter 1. The Secret of His Birth. This paper is golden in both the literal and figurative sense of the word. Can you see the golden edges? This paper is expensive. It was used only in correspondence with the highest royal personages, so it had golden edges. The Astrakhan archives hold a list of documents containing information about the things Bukhay Khan owned. This document started the history of the Bukhay Horde. There's a surprising page in the history of Kazakhstan connected with the relations between Kazakhstan and Russia. It refers to the royal decision to give a huge piece of territory to them. Although nomads lived there before the decision was taken, the area belonged to the Russian Empire. Bukay's second wife, Atan Khanum, gave birth to a son in the same year when the Khanate was established. He was named Jikangir, which meant world conqueror, or Jungir for short. However, there was some accidental or perhaps intentional confusion about the date of his birth. Jungir Khan wrote in his service record that he'd been born 2 years later. There was one more secret. It's said that after the future Khan was born, the doctor who delivered the baby disappeared in a strange way. It remains unclear how that doctor appeared in the horde and who he was. However, everything is clear about Jungir. He was a direct descendant of Abulkhair, the Khan of the Little Rus. Abulkhair Khan's son was Nur Ali, his grandson was Bukay, and Jungir was his great-grandson. The governor of Astrakhan, Andreevsky, was considered Bukay Khan's good friend. They agreed that Jungir could study in Astrakhan. Chapter 2. Astrakhan University Life. In the second half of the 19th century, Astrakhan was a merchant city and there were not many officials or noblemen. There were only few stone houses. Mainly, there were so-called small wooden dwellings. The floors had to be clean, which was a peculiarity of Astrakhan's houses. As a rule, there was a mixture of simplicity and expensive things. The latter were necessary in a house. It was a feature of the local colonial style. Although the governor's house was different from all the others, family life was approximately the same. It's difficult to say exactly why Jangar was sent to live in the house of the Astrakhan governor and was brought up there. Could the boy, who was born soon after the Kazakhs moved to the right bank of the Ural River, be a hostage, thanks to whom the Kazakhs could live in Astrakhan's steppes peacefully? On the other hand, the visionary Bukhay Khan could have done it in order to prepare him to be his successor. When Jangar arrived in the governor's house, he could already read and write in Arabic and Persian. It's said that he could speak other Asian languages, as a hereditary Genghis was supposed to, but could not speak Russian. However, this problem was soon solved because the Khan's descendant was a very talented and skillful young man. They spoke various languages in the governor's house. Of course, they spoke Russian, but also French, Kazakh, and they even liked speaking German. In this way, Jangar became multilingual. It was a rule to hold balls in the governor's house because the etiquette and his official position demanded that. He danced the waltz for the first time in Astrakhan. Dancing was a necessary subject, but it was also said that Jangar had problems learning to do so. As a rule, a noble young man from an Asian land was sent to some uncle or another serious person who brought him up. He lived in governor's chambers, studied Russian, and teachers or tutors were assigned to him. Presumably, the Astrakhan doctor Kelts taught the heir German. It is said that Stepan Andreevich did his best to bring up Jangar properly. He planned what subjects he should study and chose teachers for the boy. He taught the Khan's heir as well, when he had the time. Incidentally, the governor was quite an extraordinary person. He was famous for his high intelligence and had a decent education himself and was completely honest while the others around him were corrupt. This is what his contemporaries wrote. Jangar was brought up in Governor Andreevsky's house for over 10 years, but sometimes he took breaks. The governor was a doctor. He was the person who conveyed a love for science to Jangar. Andreevsky opened the Medical and Surgical Academy in St. Petersburg and was its first director. He described and studied the disease which is known today as anthrax. In order to study the disease, he even caught it on purpose and survived by lucky chance. A bit later, Jangar decided to open his own first hospital and pharmacy in the Kazakh steppes. During the reign of Jangar Khan, a chemist was opened and these small bottles were found. Hematogen was made in accordance with Dr. Gomel's method for children and patients. I'm going to open a hospital and a pharmacy, teach medical assistants so they can give people inoculations against smallpox and treat them when they're ill. He gave the first inoculations against smallpox, one of the most dangerous diseases in the steppe, to his own children. Jangar absorbed everything that happened around him. He was interested in everything, including not only the history of his people, but also history of everything around him. It's unknown if Jangar arrived in Astrakhan on his own or together with the herdsman Utemis's son. Makhambet, poet and rebel, was literate and could speak Russian quite well. However, it's unclear where he studied it. The boys were childhood friends and usually they were together. Probably they studied together in Andreevsky's house. Anyway, the subjects studied by the heir were slightly different. He was a Khan's son and had to prove that he wasn't just an educated and influential person, but also his father's worthy heir. Actually, researchers have doubts about many facts in the biography of the Khan. There's almost no information about his upbringing. His contemporaries said that he had received education only thanks to himself. If he really was brought up by Andreevsky or someone else in Astrakhan, it remains unknown how long Jangar lived at Andreevsky's house and what was done in order to bring him up. Chapter 3. A Fight for the Throne. Bukhari Khan died from hydropsy on May the 21st, 1815. In accordance with Bukhari's will, Shigai or Sagai, Jangar's uncle, became the regent. It was a unique case in the Kazakh steppes, where ruler's power wasn't inherited because Khans were elected. It was planned that the eldest son would be the Khan. It was still a young, even small boy and then it was impossible to make him the ruler. However, when he would turn 21, he could become the Khan and rule the horde. Jahangir was 14, but if he had been born 2 years later, he would be only 12. In spite of this, he wasn't going to relinquish his power. The relationship between the uncle and nephew was strained because Shigai himself wanted to be the Khan. On October the 29th, 1816, the military governor was asked to make the horde ruler its Khan, but Prince Volkonsky rejected it. Nevertheless, Shigai kept intending to become the Khan and asked to make him the Khan again in late 1822. He feared that Jangar would be his rival and tried to slander him. However, when Jangar was asked questions about that, he proved that he was not guilty of anything. There were other intrigues too. The Russian authorities recommended Jahangir's mother, who complained about Shigai, not to argue with the regent and said that her son should always be next to the uncle. Most likely, Sultan Sagai arrived in Astrakhan and had to stay somewhere. Here's a request for providing Sultan Sagai with a flat where he could stay. It's unknown whether the young person continued his education after his father's death or not. We don't know where he lived either. It's unlikely that he lived at his uncle's. Besides, Jahangir had a large apartment in Astrakhan, but that house hasn't remained. Andreevsky died in 1818. It was mentioned that after Bukhari's heir probably had not stopped studying. It's known that he lived in Saratov for some time and was acquainted with the local governor. The latter said that Jahangir was quite a worthy young man. Jahangir Khan always had a certain charm with people he talked to. According to his contemporaries, he remained a Kyrgyz Kazakh for his people, but a scientist recognized as a scientist. They paid attention to his opinion and enjoyed listening to him. It seems he continued studying all his life. One of the last lists of the books ordered by him proves how versatile his reading list was. It included Architecture of the 19th Century, Russian Empire Atlas, Criminal Law Basics, and a description of the Patriotic War of 1812, and Dead Souls by Gogol. Epilogue, the highly respectable Khan. Although the new Khan is quite young, even the elderly respect him and follow his advice because he can maintain their traditions and at the same time demonstrates the secular education he received in Astrakhan. The enthronement ceremony was held in Khan's Grove in Uralsk on the 26th of June, 1824. The 8-year rivalry with his uncle finished with Jahangir's victory. His mother helped him a lot because she wrote to the Emperor Alexander I, who agreed to her request. Incidentally, the Khan's mother wrote in this letter that Jahangir had already reached majority and had been born in 1801. However, many people think it was done on purpose. He was born in 1803. At that time, people reached majority at the age of 21. Thus, he added 2 years to become the Khan sooner. It's said that Jahangir's excellent education impressed the Russian authorities and helped him to become the Khan. He was one of the first Kazakh rulers who paid a lot of attention to education and thought that science could really conquer the world. If science benefits us to such a great extent now, our grandchildren will not be able to live without it. Any effort and expense will be much more fruitful if they are aimed at providing young people with education.